the feeling is very different. The unique thing about pen is it forces you to be there in contact, really aware of what you're doing, because you could, I guess you could cover up a line, but once you put it down, it's there and it's a part of the drawing and has to be dealt with. So there's an intensity that part of the process brings to my process. I do have to say that this didn't happen quickly. It took me a long time to have the confidence to work unaided by idea sketches or thumbnails or things like that. But once the confidence was there, then it was easy to follow this process of essentially just following the line as it comes out on the paper.
Norm, can I
Yes.
just interrupt to say someone asked, what size of pen do you use and what is your paper of choice?
Okay. I just found a new Strathmore Bristol, which works really nicely with these pens. And my pen favorite is the 005, which is the next to smallest pen that they make. They make a 007, which makes an incredibly fine line. But if you look at it incorrectly, it doesn't, it ceases to function. So they're a little persnickety, but the line is waterproof, light-proof, archival, acid-free, and so you can count on it being around for a while. Okay. That Bristol is by Strathmore, and here in town you can get it at our new art supply store, which I've forgotten the name of. Ravens Hook. Ravens Hook, yeah. My work has always been drawn very closely from the natural world. There are times when I finish a drawing and I say, well, why did you do that? What now that you're done with it, what does it say, or what does it have? But generally, I feel like I'm on a continuum of, I'm learning my images better. I'm getting a little bit better at draftsmanship. I am really comfortable, like I mentioned earlier, with these new small drawings, but I've experimented in other ways. At one point in the early 2000s, I said to myself, what would happen if you worked a little bigger? And at that point, I had been working on half sheets of watercolor paper, which is 15 by 22. So the next logical step was to work with a full sheet of watercolor paper, and I found that I liked that a lot. The next step was to a full sheet of illustration board, which is 30 inches by 40 inches. And then I realized that you can buy high quality drawing paper in 30-foot rolls. So I bought a roll of paper, Arches, and I think it was hard pressed, but and decided that I would do a 30-foot drawing. Really naive, not having the slightest idea what I was getting myself into. I did figure out that 30 feet was 360 inches. So if I did the equivalent of 1 inch a day, I could finish this drawing in a year. And I thought it would make sense for that drawing to follow a year. So I took off and started drawing and found that I loved the scale. I loved the chance to do detail and the chance to do larger areas at the same time, to do little explorations and move forward. Unfortunately, the only place I had to work was on our kitchen table. So for the next 10 months, the family had to give up any reasonable place to have dinner. And I continued on the drawing. The great part of it was the drawing took on a life of its own. And that is, instead of considering keeping up with something, I was just drawing, and I was drawing more hours each day. It was getting more exciting and more intense. And then one day it crossed my mind that I should try and figure out where I am in this 30 feet. So I unrolled the rest of the drawing, and I realized that I was desperately near the end. So I ended up not really finishing the drawing, but running out of paper. And that was after 10 months. So it was the most intense, exciting drawing experience of my life. I'm so fortunate that a patron stepped forward and purchased it for the Kettleson, or the Sitka Community Library, which is downtown, and it's installed there. I subsequently did some smaller ones. I did a 30-foot drawing that was half a sheet, so it was 24 inches by 30 feet. Again, fun, but not the intensity of the big drawing. And every once in a while, I think about working large again. The practicality of it is not good. I'm just fortunate that the library had a place that could take a drawing of that size. The problem with 30 feet is it's hard to find 30 feet of unbroken space somewhere in most buildings. So there's that side of it. And I think there's also the intensity of the experience of it, which I realize I now know. And when I started that first big one, I had no idea what I was getting into, which is, I guess, pretty much the story of my career. I've always had fun. I've spent a lot of time teaching. I like teaching. I'm glad I'm not a full-time teacher. It's really taxing work, but it's fresh to see the work of young people and of other adults that I've had the opportunity to work with. Good. Let's change vein a little bit, and another experience that's been really important to me is keeping a journal. And I have on and off since 2000 kept a journal. There have been a few times when I've stopped, but by and large, I do it every day. In my schedule, it's really nice to do it late in the day. It becomes a way to sort of synthesize the day and what happened. I generally write down activities. I write down the weather. I write the amount of time I got in the studio. So I have a record of that. I don't know why, but I do. and then I draw various images which are changing. The one that I've kept, let's see, there's an eye. I draw a single eye every day. Oh, thank you, Ellie.
Of course.
Great. And I've done that throughout the time that I've done a journal. And I mean, I can see where you would say, gee, it must be really tedious to do the same images over and over. And that's not true. I'm still doing eyes, and every night, that's the fun thing I start my journal with, is a drawing of my eye. Sometimes it's my eye, sometimes it's not. At this point, this is from 2014. I'm doing an eye. I'm doing a profile of a human face. I'm inventing one shape, and I'm also drawing a circle onto the page, and then adding a face into that. And let's see, I don't know how well this is showing. Thank you. There it is. Yeah. The thing I like about the journal is it allows me to take chances and do things differently, because I never have any intent in showing these, and these drawings exist only for the experience of doing them. So it's been a really valuable experience for me. I encourage everyone who's a serious drawer to be a journal keeper, for ideas and thoughts and all sorts of different things. Yeah. But here's one from a slightly different period. Let's see if it isn't slightly different. Let's see, we'll do this page. So you can see this feels a little different. Sometimes I'd find a photograph that I really liked and clip that out and add that to the journal just as a reference, so it's something to come back to. Good. Just a few more.
I want to ask, Norm, when you do your eyes, when you do your eye, is that from memory, or are you looking in a mirror like that? And then also one other quick question. Sarah asked what your inspirations are, if I could find that, what your I can't find it. What are your greatest inspirations? So those two questions, and now I'll mute again.
Okay. And no, I don't. I've drawn my eye and looked at my eye for so long that I don't require any outside information to do that. That wasn't always true, but now I never need any outside source. The thing that's again is valuable with it, I think, is just the repetition of it and forcing yourself to look carefully and to build an image from a known subject. And that gets us on to the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which is reference materials. And I know there are lots of people who cast an off eye at the use of reference materials, but my feeling is you can do anything except trace, and I'm a great person for going to outside sources for inspiration. And Sarah, I'll come back to your question in a minute. I have lots of reference materials. One of the things that I use a lot is this book that I got from the Smithsonian series. It's called Natural History. It is a photograph of every plant, every animal, every rock on the whole planet, every flower. And so I use it two ways. If I want to draw something, for instance, I went through a period recently where I thought it'd be fun to draw rabbits. So I needed reference material because I don't know a lot about rabbits other than that same general way that everybody knows them. So I was, able to go to this and find different poses, different rabbits, different, whoops. So this book, and I'll just, it just has an unbelievable amount of information in it. All the fishes, all the things. If you don't have enough information, you're making generalizations about things. As I was telling somebody recently, if you asked me to draw a dog, I could draw you a dog, but it would be a very unspecies specific kind of dog. It would be a very generalized dog. And that's not what my intent would be with drawings. I'd like to do a specific dog. So I use reference materials. And the other thing is, like all sorts of technology now, there's unbelievable amounts of information out there. There isn't an image, I don't think, that you can find that you can't access on on the internet or through technology. The other thing I do is I keep a tear file, and a tear file for me is just specific information about things. This one happens to be on birds, and if I want to, two things. If I want to be inspired, I'll sometimes go to this and just look at birds and look at them carefully and with intensity. And the other thing is, of course, to use it for information, so that when I'm doing something, I'm doing it reasonably close to nature, and that would be my intent. So I think people should do three things. They should gather reference materials for things that excite them, for things that they want to work with. They should keep a journal, and they should have a tear file of some sort for both inspiration and information. And going back to Sarah's question, my inspiration is always in nature. I'm not inspired to draw figures or faces. I'm not inspired to draw buildings or certain kinds of landscapes. So all of my inspiration comes from the natural world, and I'm very place centric. I love what I do where I live. Uh, I love the kind of trees and images that we have here. Uh, so I find it always uh, incredible to walk out uh, and to go someplace that you walked 20 times before recently and see something new each time. Exciting, exciting. I hope that answers your question, Sarah. The other thing, I guess, that I just talk about briefly is one of the ways I think we improve our drawings is we look closely and carefully at things, at objects that we like. This is a vertebrae off, I think it's a deer. I'm not totally sure. Found it on the beach and it was nice and clean, and it's a treasure and it's a piece of sculpture, but it's a wonderful thing to draw. And the neat thing is you can work with perspective on it, you can work with tone on it, you can try to replicate it, you can use it as a jumping off place to do an abstract drawing. But it's intriguing, it's appealing to me, and it is very valuable in improving drawing and skills. You, of course, need to figure out what motivates you and what excites you, and find your own images in that. But this is another thing that I often draw from. It's just a twisted piece of branch that I think, again, I found on the beach, and it's intriguing to look at, and then consequently that translates itself to being an intriguing subject for me.
Another question was, what artists have inspired you? And then also a separate question was, we think of your work, we associate your work with nature. Why is your journal full of people and portions of people?
Good question. Well, it's the value of a journal in its privacy. I can draw things that I don't have to show out into the world, and I can experiment with face shapes or things like that. So yeah, in my work, I don't think you would see, in the work that I present to the world, I don't think you would see those other sorts of images. But in something where I'm experimenting and learning and trying to move forward, yeah, why not try it? And then, oh my gosh, I've forgotten the other question already.
What artists have been?
Oh, thank you. What artists inspire me? I think the overriding inspiration in my life has been Andrew Wyeth. I'm constantly moved by his sense of color. Excuse me. I'm not a colorist. I just draw. He's able to pull colors out of the landscape that are so real and so full and so correct or right that he was a genius at that. He's been an inspiration since I was in college, certainly. Though he was certainly not the kind of person you'd bring up in a conversation with your painting teacher. And I've grown to love Van Gogh's work for a completely different reason, but I love his integrity and his straightforward way of approaching something. You don't have any idea what an incredible person he was until you read his journals and look at his sketches and see how hard he worked. He did an unbelievable number of drawings in 4 or 5 years. He only worked a little bit of time before his death. He's been even more of an inspiration as I mature. I like Robert Motherwell, who's an American artist from the 50s, a school called Abstract Expressionism. He did big, bold, I think beautiful things. Another person that's been an inspiration to me is Psy Twombly, who's I think a British artist and does essentially drawings, but they're rarely drawings. I think they're always not drawings of something, that they're lines that he's putting onto the paper that are expressive. I like his work a lot. I'd suggest that you go online and take a look at his stuff as well. Yeah, that's the, I think the major people that have been inspiring to me. So plowing forward, I want to save some time so we could maybe do a couple exercises. So I want to just show you a little bit of what I've been doing in the last few months and talk about the philosophy of where that comes from. Thank you. This is a little rock island study with a tree, which I think is indicative of what I've done. I've done it a million times. But like the eye, I never tire of these. They're fun to do. They're fast. They're intimate. I love the size of them. And in the past several months, I've done a couple hundred of them, I think, at least, and tons of fun. This is just another one from that series. Yet another one that, and what I love about this drawing is the way that it tucks in between the rocks. It feels like something you could actually see. Here's a little just black and white study. And I call this a study, which I don't consider the little island studies. They exist in their own space, but this is trying to get the feeling of rocks living in amongst trees. And then, of course, I go back to my favorite images, the trees. These are pencil, they're pen and watercolor and colored pencil. Probably more colored pencil than watercolor. Here's another black and white little study. Yeah, just a simple rock, a simple tree. And my whole goal here is to make this feel like you could see that, you could feel it, you could experience it. So very, very simple idea. Then earlier this year, I did a series of drawings that, and it's it's the world's greatest marketing technique. Just hasn't worked so far, but I'm holding out confidence that it's going. So what I've done is I've done a collection of southeast images, and they're all 8 inches by 10 inches, and I sell them with an easel, and you buy 4 drawings, and they're somewhat similar. But the beauty of having them on an easel and them being the same is you just, when you get tired of looking at this one, or not even if you're not tired of it, if you're not looking at it carefully, then you put a new one up and you jog yourself into looking at it fresh. So these have been a lot of fun to do. I'm sure that in another lifetime, they'll be marketable, and I'll figure that out. And then I just want to show you one more piece, and this is a drawing. This is about 14 by 18, I think, something like that. Drawing of a tree, and it somehow it just works, and I don't have a much more of an explanation of that, other than it feels like a real tree. It feels like something I could walk up to and touch, and I don't mean photographically, but I mean its lines and its movement is true to the nature of a tree. And on this drawing, I happen to add some little notes about what I was thinking during its completion. Probably not a good idea. I was excited about it at the time, but it looks a little bit like a journal entry and less like a drawing. So it might have a place, but I don't know that I'll go back to that. So, Pat, did we warn people ahead of time that we might be doing a couple exercises?
More or less.
Okay, so it's not a total surprise to them, but
Right. It might be to some people, but they'll play along.
okay. Well, let's just go through one of the exercises real quick, and I think the secret to drawing well is seeing well, and I like to say that what I can see, I can draw. What I can't see, then like I mentioned earlier, I generalize about. So I have developed an exercise that I think sort of highlights this quality of, we always think we're looking well, but in truth, I think we need to look with more precision and more with more intensity to look better. So this is a simple, pretty simple exercise, has 3 parts to it. And the first thing I asked is I asked the student to position themselves so that the drawing paper is here. And then I want them to hold their hand up in some sort of interesting shape. Can be clenched, can be open, can be any combination with that. And then I want you to do a drawing of that hand, but I don't want you to look at the paper. I don't want you to even glance at the paper. So you'll need to position yourself when you do this exercise. You need to position yourself so that you can clearly see the hand, but can't see the paper at all. And then the first one should be a simple drawing of an outline of the hand. And this is a really good and clear example of when we generalize, we make very quick, sketchy lines. When we're looking carefully, the line takes on all different kinds of qualities. So, excuse me. So I can tell by looking at people's drawings whether or not they're really looking. Because if they're really looking, they're picking up all of these little indentations and bumps and changes in direction. So, and it should take about 3 minutes for you to trace very carefully with your eye around the perimeter of your hand and to get an outline. Never, never looking at the paper, you know. So let me take a drink of water here. So that's the first incantation of this. The second drawing, change the position of your hand, change your position. No, don't change your position, excuse me. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to look at the hand and try and really see and memorize that part of the hand. Then you're going to move to your paper where you can't see the hand, and you're going to draw as much as you remember. When you get to the point where you can no longer remember exactly what it looked like, go back to the hand and study it again. I think you'll be really surprised how accurate you can get your hand to work looking this way. And then I think to finish this off, I think it makes sense to do a drawing where your hand is in position and you're looking at it and looking at your drawing, a more traditional way of looking at things. So that's an exercise that, and I've used that with elementary school students, and I've used it with adults, and I think when it really works for you, it's an extremely valuable experience to have. Let's see, I had one more little thing I wanted to do. I do want to leave some time for questions and answers. Okay. No, really, the other thing I wanted to talk about was finding objects around that are interesting to you, that you would gain excitement by drawing. I think I showed you this vertebrae off of possibly off of a deer. So I think that's what I want to say. I'm sure there's some gaping holes that I left information out, but are there questions? Is there any?
Okay, so anyone can unmute and I don't know, maybe raise your little chat hand and then ask a question. I asked Norm earlier today and he told me, but I'll ask it again now just because. I asked how many hours a day does he draw or spend time doing artwork? I'll let him answer that one.
I like to get 4 hours of work a day, and that's really drawing time, and then the sort of ancillary things of matting and framing and doing the other parts of the business are fill the rest of my time in the studio. I don't always get 4 hours. I'd like to. I'd like to. I know I have a friend who has really good work habits, and he routinely, I think, gets 8 or 9 hours a day in his studio. Yeah. The other thing I thought might mention, if you're not in Sitka, the image of the drawing from the library that I mentioned, it's 4 feet by 30 feet, is on my Facebook page. And my Facebook page is simple, just Norman Campbell Art. And I don't think it's case sensitive.
It's already in the top.
Oh, okay. It's already, somebody's way ahead of me. Okay, well, I'm still open for questions, but I want to thank everybody for attending. And I hope you have a little bit more insight into my work and how I've gotten to where I am today.
Norm, I have a question.
Yes.
Have you always done pen and pencil? Or I mean, pen and pencil. Have you at any point done paints? I mean, I guess you did some paints in that one. You did a little bit of watercolor, you said, in one of those.
Yeah. No, at some points in my career in the early 90s and the mid 90s, and after the turn of the century, I painted quite a lot. I painted mostly abstract things. I did some landscapes. Here's one that I keep around that is just
Maybe just hold them.
that. Okay.
Here we go.
Yeah.
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 Not too big.
That's not working. Let's see. Never mind. I can't figure this out. This is an acrylic. It's about 14 by 18. I consider these fields of color. There's a different part of it that doesn't show it well, but I, at various times, drag out the old paints and stumble around for a bit. I'm not a colorist, and color doesn't, I can't control color like I can line. So it's much more satisfying for me to draw than to paint. But every once in a while, I give it a whirl.
Hey Norm,
In-
I have one of the pieces up here on the wall at Dad's place in my camera. One of your color field pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Right there.
Right there, yeah. Will people be able to see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. And that is, for me, a monumental painting. I think it's 3 feet by 6 feet. Or 3 feet by 5 feet. And way too big, way too big. So.
Did Ellie have a picture of that? I couldn't focus in on where that piece was.
Sarah.
Sarah.
Or Sarah.
Sarah did, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Beautiful.
And if no one has any other questions, Sarah put some things up in the chat, and I tried to write a few things down in the chat. And maybe Norm could just repeat those 3 exercises just real quick so that everybody has an idea of what they want to go home and maybe try out.
Okay. I gladly do that. You want to position yourself so that you can see your hand and not your paper, because you want your focus totally on your hand and not on your paper at all. You, in fact, don't care what this drawing looks like. You're trying to teach yourself to look with intensity. So I would find a position that was interesting for my hand. And the first step is just a contour drawing, and that is very carefully. I'm going to trace the outside line of my hand, and I think it takes at least 3 minutes if you're looking at it really carefully and with intensity. The second part of that exercise is to change your, not to change your position, but to look again with intensity at your hand. And then when you feel like you have a good idea on what that hand looks like, look away from the hand, begin the drawing, and draw until you no longer have information. And then stop the drawing, go back to the hand, look, observe, remember, go back to the drawing until again you run out of information. That drawing may look a little bit more like a hand. And then the third thing, the third part of that exercise, I think, is to position yourself so that you can see both your model and your drawing and move back and forth between those. Again, it's terribly important to look with as much intensity as possible. Is that clear?
Yes, that's perfect. And I am going to try and get this written up, and I think I'll put it into the chat, and maybe people can see the chat later. I'm not sure. I'm going to collect this so that somehow we can have it out in the world so people can access this information to work from. And if no one has anything else, I just want to apologize abjectly. I can't tell you how sorry I am that I had my computer plugged in. There is no reason that it should have gone dead, but of course it did. And I apologize to Norm because that was very unfair, but it's been wonderful to hear about your drawing, and I can't tell you how much I love your artwork. It's not my style at all, but I am in awe, and I thank you very much for doing this for us. And I hope that people will be interested in coming back and seeing and participating in more of these talks as I get better at technology and we get to share other people's work too. Thank you all so much.